Fuel prices have skyrocketed in the past months, with petrol nearly hitting 30 rand per litre mark. Government responded by putting in place a temporary fuel levy subsidy to cushion motorists from the exorbitant prices. But some analysts say that does nothing for those living below the poverty line. Let's bring in Professor Heinrich Bohlmann now, Associate Professor at the University of Pretoria's Department of Economic Studies. Prof, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. Welcome to today here on ENCA. What have you found when it comes to the problem with the idea that fuel subsidies, for example, will be a magic wand sort of to motorists in the current situation?
Yeah, look, it's a case of how well targeted we can do these subsidies. That's really the catch here, right? If we just broadly reduce the price of fuel through a subsidy, and then remember, you don't get something for nothing. So that subsidy has to then be paid for in other ways. And if it's paid for in a way like increasing taxes in different parts of the economy, again, if that's not a well-designed a system that's well-targeted, our research shows that that ultimately worsens inequality and the poverty problem. Whilst it might reduce just the cost of petrol itself, those other metrics in terms of inequality and poverty tend to worsen even more on top of what the general price increase would have done.
So what kind of ideas would be there, for example, to targeting the poorest of the poor so there is a benefit, as you are saying? What ideas are there?
Look, there's not a heck of a lot we can do in the short run, right? Technology really gets in the way of us designing very targeted programs to help the poor. You know, if we can imagine if all travelers had cards that you can tap to take a train or a bus system or a taxi or something like that. But it's just not viable in the South African context. And it's also very difficult to just get direct subsidies out to the relevant affected people. So over time, we have to adopt better technology population-wide to allow for more targeted solutions. I think in the interim, what we need to do over time is look at the existing structure of the petrol price, right? And say, all right, where is there areas where we can get better bang for our buck, right? Where is, for example, the petrol price formula hurting us as consumers? We've done separate research with Prof. Crompton to show how essentially deregulating the price in a different sense, where we look at those trade and transport margins and that basic fuel price and the formula, how it's all determined, that we could easily shave a rand off the price, just, investigating those areas. And then as far as the two big taxes as part of the fuel price, the general fuel levy, the road accident fund, we also need to make sure we get good bang for our buck there as ultimately taxpayers in this context.
Yeah, I mean, you speak about a need for a more effective policy response, and you're saying that the oil price shocks are increasing poverty and inequality. There has to be targeting the poor and vulnerable of households. Maybe that could help. But realistically, South Africa does not really set the price of oil. We import the oil using dollars, and depending on the rand-dollar exchange rate, how our currency is doing, we might be paying more today and less tomorrow. And then we add these levies and stuff like that. So what are your thoughts about the issue of lowering the cost of fuel in the long run to benefit everybody?
Look, like you say, there's not much we can do about the oil price going up or down, right? Obviously, we've got this kind of double whammy that apart from the international oil price, which can fluctuate heavily, I mean, it's just doubled in the past year, we've got then the added risk of the exchange rate effect. And if the rand worsens on top of the oil price, we see what's effectively happening now. Well, fuel prices basically doubling in the space of 18 months. So, in that sense, we can't do much, and we are exposed in that sense. Even if we were to,
And the poor will even suffer the more, according to what you're finding, is that subsidizing the oil price here or the fuel price worsens
again,
increases poverty.
Yeah, look, again, I mean, it stems from the fact that the poor tend to use predominantly as part of its budget, it consumes food, it consumes energy, it consumes transport goods, right? And so obviously a rising oil price affects that kind of directly in terms of transport. And so, and I think the message of the research is that poorly designed subsidy programs would exacerbate that problem, right? So I think what the message is, we need to develop good technologies targeted that allows for targeted policy responses, because bland cutting the price with a subsidy that has to be paid through some general tax increase elsewhere over time is not the way to go.
Thank you very much for your time and your explanations. That's Professor Heinrich Bohlmann, Associate Professor, Department of Economic and Management Studies at the University of Pretoria, just explaining that they found in their research that the fuel price subsidies that the government has been doing do not necessarily reduce the levels of poverty. Government should look at rather different types of effective policy to really deal with poverty.